LDComics is a women-led welcoming to all forum run by creators. We champion the graphic novel form, particularly works with an autobiographical voice. Our activity is towards supporting and equipping graphic novelists, especially but not exclusively people identifying as women. Established in 2009 by Sarah Lightman and Nicola Streeten as Ladies Do Comics, today LDComics is run by a committee of published graphic novelists: Rachel Ball, Emma Burley, Lou Crosby, Wallace Eates and Nicola Streeten. From the start, the core of LDC's activity has been the monthly meetings, hosting presentations from invited guests to a public audience in a welcoming atmosphere for networking and making friends. The introduction of LDC online monthlies aims to replicate the joy and stimulation of our physical meetups. Everyone is welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Felistas Thairu. From Nairobi, Kenya. So yeah, here's a few things you need to know about me. I'm a comic artist, 2D animator and filmmaker in Nairobi, Kenya. Currently, I'm the media arts coordinator at Reveal Comics Conversations East Africa, which launched in 2023 after our meeting with Dr. Nicola. So that was like a Kickstarter. So since then, we've been moving forward. So my love for art began in my childhood years. So I began drawing when I was still in primary school, and then in high school I did fine art, and then in university I did film and theater studies. So here are some of my artworks. I picked just a few to show the variety of art I can do. So yeah. Career-wise, my background is in camera work and cinematography. That's what I majored in the university. Though after COVID-19, I switched towards comics and digital art. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. But occasionally, I do take photos and videos, and especially for Reveal, I document every journey that we've been doing since 2023. I have also done animation. So I have several animations that I've done. The major one is called Peperuka. It's a story of a young chicken who wants to fly. And since chicken cannot fly, so he invents ways to fly. So like catapults, making wings with wax, just anything hilarious, he is able to do that. So last year, I also graduated from the Molo Academy and Goblo, Paris in South Africa. So yeah, as an animator, that is something I have also tried to build on. So yeah, so why comics? Comics, I believe, are the backbone of a strong animation industry. And in Kenya, animation has just started out. It is not as strong as other countries. So finding a stable job in animation in our country is quite hard. And if I look for opportunities in other countries, they always ask for comic portfolios. So I have to have comic books or comic works or comic strips first so that I can move forward in the animation pipeline. So my major in animation is in storyboarding. So storyboarding and making comics is almost one and the same thing. So yeah. So in Kenya, we are focusing on building the comics community, not just people who are making fan art of Marvel, Disney, and manga, anime, but we are now focusing on people who are actually creating their own stories or stories about our heritage, our past, and maybe our fiction. So that is what we are focusing on. Here are some of my comic artwork. So after Dr. Nicola left, we got an extension by the British Council to do this one called Namunyak. It is a story of women in Kajiado who are facing a lot of issues like gender-based violence and harsh culture that is male-centered. So they're struggling. There is a lot of FGM, gender-based violence. There is no education. When we went there to record those stories, it was at the height of a very big drought. So they had a lot of issues that they wanted to talk about, and we were able to illustrate those stories in a way that adequately represents what was going on in their lives. So yeah, that is one. This right here on the bottom left is a comic book we launched last month. It is called The Magic of the Sun. It was launched in 3 languages. You will see it later. So this is the first page of what I did. So here it is in Swahili. So Swahili is one of our national languages and also is taught in our schools. So yeah, for this here called Nairobi Pressure, it is a comic book that shows the pressure that young girls who come from the villages to the city face to try and conform to what the Nairobi top girl looks like. So there's a lot of things that they try to do that lead them astray. And on the right is Air That Kills. In most cities, there are some companies that pollute the air, not just cars, but just the whole city setup is so toxic that the children are suffering, and some parts we have nothing that the government is doing about. So this is a story that shows how, if you can see here in this window, there are 2 kids who can't leave their house because they can't breathe outside. And one of them has a gas mask and is struggling a lot. So it's a story that shows how their journey with their respiratory issues goes on and how they are looking for good solutions. So yeah. So with all this I have done because of Reveal Comics Conversations. So as I said, I am currently the media arts coordinator at Reveal Comics Conversations. So Reveal Comics Conversations is a platform that is aimed at creating a vibrant community and sustainable ecosystem for comics and graphic novels in Kenya and East Africa. So as Dr. Nicola said, when the call was going on for looking for these women who are doing comics, Kenya was too small because we needed to widen our scope, because if we couldn't find enough women in Kenya, the same in Tanzania and Uganda and Rwanda. So we just had to consolidate all these East African countries to broaden ourselves and make ourselves stronger. So currently we've been hosting monthly events. The last one was this last weekend, so Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Normally it's one event, but the last weekend there was the Nairobi Book Festival, which we were participating, and also we launched a book, which is a collection of political cartoons, a collection of cartoons from 2017 to 2025 of a very talented cartoonist called Gado. Yeah. So here are 2 designs I made to emphasize on our work in comics. So this is our mascot to show what we are doing. So our focus is on book launches, capacity building, comics in schools and comic festivals, and comics publishing. That is one thing that has been very an itching point in our country. Most of the publishers do not want to publish our works. So unless we have influence from other people who are vouching for our book, they don't want to work with us. So it's either you self-publish or not publish at all. So we launched in 2023, and these monthly events have have been well received in Nairobi, and not just in Nairobi, but in the whole of East Africa. We've added more countries, not just Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. There is now Somalia, there is now Sudan, and part of Ethiopia also. So it's become now a proper conversation. So last month, we held our second edition of the Reveal Comic Art Festival on the theme of comics in education, adding fun to teaching and learning. So we were also graced by the Colombian Embassy, who came to also tell us more about the Afro-Colombians and what kind of work, comic art they are doing in their country and how they'd want to collaborate with us also as Kenyans. So our history of excellence, in 2023, we launched the 3 tales, Nalotwesha, Nemayan, and Namunyak. This was when we launched Reveal. So as we launched this book is when we launched Reveal. And we also got coverage from the dailies, so the Sweat, Blood, and Tears for women comics in Kenya. So as you can see, the book that was produced with Dr. Nicola, the women were reading it and they were able to also interact with the artwork. In as much as most of them did not go to school, they were able to interact and tell what was going on in the stories. So the stories focused on real-life experiences of FGM. The digital comic book, the 3 stories were developed after a story sharing workshop with a group of women in Kajiado in a small project that was supported by the British Council. So other works, last year we were able to launch the first ever Kenyan comics anthology. It is a collection of 21 Kenyan comic artists who contributed to the theme of A Slice of Life. So these 21 Kenyan comic artists are not just the veterans. It's those who have done comics for 40 years and those who are actually starting out. So everyone had a chance, and there was a workshop before that. So as we build on capacity building, so there was a training that was done, and then a period of creation was made with a lot of mentorship to show like the young ones how to structure their panels, how to structure their stories, how to fill in a few gaps here and there. So also in March, the book I was telling you, The Magic of the Sun, there are stories on solar power to illustrate to our audiences how comics may be used to teach children and teenagers. So this book was launched in 3 languages, so in French, English, and Swahili. So since the 3 languages are used in our curriculum in our schools, we saw it fit to do that. So it's a very beautiful book. So also, as Dr. Nicola has been mentioned, we've gotten a lot of traction from the mainstream media. We have sort of blown up we are yet to turn 2 years. We are turning 2 in June, but we've sparked so much conversation that we've had over 12 articles written about what we are doing about comics because we have disrupted the narrative. Yeah, so it's amazing to see how fast people can change and start accepting once they start seeing the results. So this is a big win for us. Yeah, so it keeps us motivated to keep going forward. So in conclusion, there's a lot to say about comics in Kenya and what we are doing as Reveal Comics Conversations. We have several projects that are upcoming and we are excited to share about. One of them is called the Comic Book Project. It's a collection. It's a project that we are doing with schools, that is teen schools, high schools, and primary schools. So the children are creating their comic books, and we'll finish doing that in August. And then from then on, we will be able to compile and share that, what children can do. So we are now able to reach the children. And in doing so, we are now able to, we are able to build a vibrant community of people who are speaking and sharing more about comics and no longer shying about that topic. So it's no longer a taboo. It's something that is now being recognized, and we are hoping in the near future we'll have the government supporting us and probably even investing in it. Yeah. So finally, thank you very much for listening to my presentation. My name is Felistas Thairu. You can see my work at ArtStation at Felistas Thairu, and my social media platforms are at Felistas Thairu. So thank you very much.
So hello, my name is Alanah Knibb. I am a science communicator, and I specialize in writing and illustrating comics. So I used to be a neuroscientist, and then I retrained. I did a master's in science communication and public engagement at the University of Edinburgh. And I've been working in this sort of comics and science space since 2016. And last year I published my first full-length graphic novel, which I'll talk to you about today, 3 Nines Fine. But just to tell you a little bit more about me briefly. So this is just to give you a sense of my graphic style. It's sort of evolved over the years. On the left, I was playing a lot more with all these different kinds of styles and colors. But gradually through my practice, I've sort of seemed to have honed in on this more black and white and key use of color approach. And now I use colors quite strategically in my work, and you'll see that with this novel as well. But outside of comics, I also teach people how to make comics as a way to amplify voices. So I ran a course teaching young people how to make comics, but also use narrative strategy. If anyone's heard of story-based strategy and the Center for Story-Based Strategy. So we use that as a way to sort of challenge dominant, unhelpful narratives for social change through comics. And also do a bit of sort of activism art as well. So we ran this installation amplifying the voices of urban youth in South Auckland to get their voices involved in the discourse on sand mining that was happening to feed the cities for cement, to try and involve them in that discourse as well. So more of an environmental lens as well as sort of taking shape in my work. But this particular project, let me go back to that one. So the book is called 3 Nines Fine, and as you can see, it's a story about brain health, and it was a collaborative project. So this is the team. Dr. Angelica Zarkali was our science advisor. She's from the University College London, and I was the writer and illustrator, and Omotola Thomas provided the original story. It's a biography. The project was funded by Alzheimer's Research UK, their Inspire Fund, which is about trying to engage people with learning about brain health and how to reduce the risk of developing dementia. So I knew for a long time that I wanted to write health journey stories. A couple of my family members are living with lifelong illnesses, including one of them has Parkinson's disease. And for us at the time of diagnosis, it was incredibly valuable to be able to see other people's stories and read about other people's experiences, just as a way to normalize it and get a sense of what to expect. And it was really grounding for us. So once I had become a sort of a comic artist, I thought, oh man, maybe that's something I'd love to do, is just help other people share their stories to get them out there. So when I saw this funding by Alzheimer's Research UK, it just seemed to tick all the boxes. So I set about trying to find someone to collaborate with. And I came across Omotola. Apologies, I was just getting over a cold, so hopefully my voice sticks with me. But yeah, I came across Omotola because she had written this incredible blog post, which we've printed in the back of the comic as well, called Where Are You? So she had recently moved to the UK from Nigeria with her young family when she got this diagnosis of young onset Parkinson's disease when she was 35. And at the time, she really struggled, especially in the UK, to find anybody else like her who was going through the same experience, and not for want of looking. So she began to feel quite alone, and yeah, so that's what this blog post sort of encapsulates. And she's calling for those other women like her to sort of stand up and talk about their illness, especially because where she's from, there's quite a lot of cultural stigma around talking about illnesses. So she pushed through anyway, despite not being able to find others, and decided she would stand up and start talking about it and sharing her story. So she created the charity Parkinson's Africa, and it became this sort of community and space where people could share their stories of Parkinson's, but also now they do heaps of work all through Africa to improve access to medication. So she has this really inspiring story and really human, heartfelt story too. So as soon as I read it, I knew I really wanted to work with her, and I reached out to her, and fortunately for me, she said yes. So we worked together on the project. This is just a little bit about her and her work, you can see. And those are the early drafts of the main character. So the book is inspired by her story. It's not a direct representation. We've fictionalized some elements, and we've changed all the names in the comic as well. But the funding was to talk about raise awareness of brain health, but she also personally really wanted to tackle cultural stigmas. So we tried to tackle through the comic the stigma around, like I said, it's sort of considered shameful from where she's from to talk about illness. And so we were trying to challenge that by showing that actually you can bring a lot of strength and honor to yourself and your family by talking about your health journeys. So I'm just going to read for you the back of the book to give you a sense of that narrative. This is the back cover. I am who I was raised to be. Now I must become who I need to be. Recently diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease, Ashabi moves her young family from Africa to the UK. The upheaval throws her whole sense of self into question. Challenged by haunting visions and stigmatized by her community, she struggles to reconcile her changing identity with her culture, Christianity, diagnosis, and motherhood. Feeling alone, she turns to her auntie Tiwa, who is living with Lewy body dementia, to find the answers she seeks. This inspiring journey, based on true events, brings a fresh and informed perspective to the link between Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia, while highlighting everyday ways we can improve our own brain health. So it's been found that 45% of dementia cases are actually linked to lifestyle factors we can change, and we can actually reduce our risk of developing dementia by taking better care of our brain health. And there's sort of 3 key ways that that you can focus on to try and do this, and that's what we've tried to do through this comic, is highlight these 3 key ways. So the ways that you can focus on, among others, but some of the key ones are to take care of your heart. So every time that the main character, Shabi, is doing something that's good for her heart, we've colored the panels this sort of pink color. Anytime that she's challenging her brain, we've colored them purple. And anytime she's staying social and connected, we've colored them green. And in this way, we were trying something a bit different, but we wanted to try and remind the reader as we go through of these everyday little things that we can actually all do to improve our brain health. So even though this book is targeted at Black African or Black British or Black Caribbean women living in the UK, there are actually heaps of things relevant for everyone in it, for anyone, you know, because actually dementia is the leading cause of death for women in the UK pretty much every year since 2011. So it's a big deal. But yeah, we've tried to keep it lighthearted and inspiring as we put the comic together. So how did we make it? So there was this initial research phase, and in it I did online research, but I also did these interviews. Omotola and I had about 6 Zoom interviews and 1 in person. And through it, she really led the way, sharing her story with me, and also trying to get a sense across of her amazing spirit and fire and humor, because she calls herself a reckless optimist, and it's a shame she couldn't be here today. She has a family situation going on at the minute, so she wasn't able to join us. But yeah, she really wanted to try and get across this sort of fire and passion as well, and I hope I've captured some of that in the book. Angelica was our science advisor, so I had interviews with her as well about the science, and I also included a focus group of people relevant to the target audience, also because we didn't have in our team much lived experience of dementia, so we managed to get that through the focus group as well. Then I put together the script, took about 3 months, I think. So we had 6 drafts. multiple reviewers. Angelica reviewed it, the focus group reviewed it. We actually had a paid editor as well, and Omotola was to review it as well, but unfortunately she wasn't available for a number of months just because she does so much. She's such a powerful woman. She does so much stuff. So I was really grateful to even have any of her time, but she did get to review it, of course, before the end. I wouldn't have published it otherwise. And it was wonderful because she came in at this critical time where we really needed fresh eyes. It was after the artwork and the script had come together on the page, and that was actually a perfect time to have someone with fresh eyes. So we did go through it piece by piece for 2 days, and she put loads of feedback in. And the comic's also been translated to Swahili, and we're releasing that version later this year. I was really aware writing this comic that there was a good chance my voice might dominate, and it's not necessarily my story. So I tried as much as possible through the creative process to mitigate against that. So by having all these review steps in the focus group, and another thing I did was I actually used a lot of the words from our interviews as the script. So instead of trying to paraphrase the others, I transcribed the interviews, and a lot of the words in the script are actually exact words that Omotola or Angelica said to me. So for the artwork, I traditionally do everything by hand, apart from the color. So I do all the sketching and then inking by hand, and then color it digitally. And then I formatted and brought it all together, and self-published it through Ingram Spark and also Amazon KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. And that was last September. So when we launched it, I launched it alongside some creative workshops across the UK. So I reached out to community groups who were relevant to the target audience and offered them this sort of free workshop, telling them a bit more about brain health and how to reduce our risk of developing dementia. And we included this creative exercise where people could sort of reflect on their own pathways with these 3 key streams: heart, socializing, and challenging your brain. And of course, told them about the comic and where to get it. So the lessons learned from the project, like I said, it's great to get feedback all the way through, but early, of course, but also on what you think is the final draft, because I had thought that we were kind of there, and then there were heaps that Omotola noticed, which was really helpful. I love collaborating with people. It adds so much authenticity and richness to the work that I just couldn't manage to bring through on my own. So I really encourage collaboration, but do add lots of time and flexibility into your timeline to make sure that collaboration can happen well. Yeah, just a note about, I think there's a lot to be had in an interdisciplinary space of comics. So science communication is a great area, and there is quite a bit of funding in there too, if you're thinking of trying to get comics funded. But yeah, if you're doing things like this, it's great to work with science advisors or focus groups to ensure there's that accuracy and quality. So our science advisor, Angelica, I also invited her to come along this evening, but she has another event actually right now at UCL, so she wasn't able to come. But she wanted to communicate to you that researchers are really keen to do public engagement and help spread their research or other important messages, but they don't really actually have the time or the know-how. So she wanted to enthuse that if you do reach out to a researcher, there's actually a really good chance they're going to want to get involved. So do think about that interdisciplinary sort of option. So what's next for us? Well, we've been super lucky in that Alzheimer's Research UK have offered us follow-on funding. So now we're doing a behavioral change study with the comic to see, does it actually help people to reduce the risk of developing dementia? Does it lead to actions that do that? So we would love for you to get involved. I've put a QR code there, so please scan it and sign up. That'll just take you to a page to submit your email address to register interest in doing the study. And then I'll send out some questionnaires in the coming sort of couple of months. But yeah, you get compensated for every questionnaire you do. And there's also a chance of getting a free copy of this comic book as part of it too. So yeah, I will also put links to these in the chat afterwards. So another thing is we're doing a mentoring program now, because we found that the people who are impacted the most by the project were those involved in the creative process. So we're gonna run a sort of 5 or 6 month free mentoring course where I'm going to help people teach them to make their own mini comics about brain health. And again, this is something you can sign up for, and we're going to launch the mini comics as an online anthology at the end. So This again is just another form to submit your email and register your interest, and then I'll send you an application pack because we do have limited spaces. But I do encourage everyone to apply. You don't need to actually have been living with a neurological condition at all. It's anybody's journey with brain health, and we are quite keen to try and get a sort of diverse group in the cohort. So if you or anyone you know is from an underrepresented background, we'd really love to hear from you too. So yeah, I'll put the links in the chat. This is just a couple of points that Angelica wanted to share. So the Arbor program at UCL, they're specifically designed to match artists with researchers to communicate about neuroscience. And also there's a free visual arts exhibition coming up at UCL about neurological research in May and June, if anyone is around at the time. So to finish up, I'm just gonna actually read you an excerpt from the comic. This part is towards the end where the main character Shabi is giving a speech at the World Parkinson's Congress. And it's a part that Omotola chose to read at the launch event. And actually, a lot of the words in this part are her direct words from the interviews. So although she wasn't able to make it today, I feel like this is what she would have wanted to read to you. So as I'm reading, yeah, just imagine Omotola too. And I've included some of the images from this scene without the speech bubbles and things, just to give you a sort of a rough sense of what the scene looks like. When I was first diagnosed, I looked everywhere for someone like me who was talking about it, who was not ashamed to talk about it. I didn't find anyone. I felt so alone and actually began to feel like I could be cursed. Well, you know that saying, if you're looking for a hero, look in the mirror? I did. And it turns out I was looking for me all along. I stood up and started talking, and it was tough, very tough. I had to learn how to be strong and vulnerable at the same time. But I'm so glad that I did it. And in a way, I've come to see Parkinson's as an unexpected ally for all the friendships and opportunities it has brought me. Opportunities that I would ordinarily never even dream of pursuing. I dream of a future for my children where we're all loved and accepted for who we are, regardless of how we look or what we can and can't do. I want to make that future a reality, but I can't do it alone. Our current healthcare system is based on outdated policies, and it's inaccessible for many non-white people living with debilitating illness. To get to the future I dream of, people working in government need to change policy to make healthcare more equitable. We can encourage them by speaking up about our illness and representing our people, which means no more hiding. I am who I was raised to be, but now I must become who I need to be. I have Parkinson's disease, and I know that in my head, in my soul, in my spirit, it cannot conquer me. I've always believed that there's power and opportunity in pain. To purify gold into its finest form, it has to go through intense amounts of heat and so on. I think they call that 3 nines fine. In the same way, I think that's what pain and adversity does to us. It forces us to go through that process of refining, and you can choose to either come out burned or refined. Nobody wants to be in a position where they have to go through fire and they have to go through hell. But if you're already there, make the best of it. So I'm asking you to let pain do to you what fire does to gold. Let it refine you. And the cover, you might have noticed the name is 3 nines fine. So that's the name for the purest form of gold you can get, 99.9%. And we've sort of carried that metaphor all the way through. In the beginning pages, there's like a unrefined gold ore, and then in the end you end up with this sort of gold medallion, and the journey that takes place in the middle is some of that fire and pain. But yeah, just such an I thought I was so inspired writing this story with her, and I really encourage you to have a look at it. So that's just my details at the end there, and I've also included the link, the name of the website where you can find more about the book. It's available for purchase on Amazon, but also in bookstores, and there's a free PDF that you can download from the website just to reduce barriers to access as well. So yeah, I think that's it from me. Thanks very much.
So while Nicola's getting this ready, what Nicola asked about, this is my first time presenting with Ladies Do Comics, and what Nicola asked about was perhaps to say something about the journey of how I got here. And it's been a while, and there's been kind of quite a bit of stuff. So what I thought was more interesting than talking about myself was talking about where I came from and how that affects things now, because this is something that I've never really talked about anywhere. Which is, so where I come from in comics. I sit in my house in South London, and I draw comics mainly for the American market, and I'm mainly an artist, although I do writing. So I'm drawing all the time for many different people, and I have, which I will get to all of that. But where I've come from is I trained as an architect, and I worked as an architect for a really long time. And I wasn't really reading comics when I was younger, because for reasons which are not entirely clear to me, architects don't really read comics. I don't really like to think about quite why that is. Anyway, so came to making comics. How did that happen? Well, the first thing is starting with architecture. If we're going to talk about comics and architecture and how architecture affects comics and why comics and architecture have things in common, what is helpful at this stage is to just talk a bit about architecture on its own. Because when I say architecture, people tend to think, oh, buildings or old guys or all these old men in drawing offices doing something. And that's not really what architecture is. I mean, buildings are to do with it and brick walls are to do with it, but really it's to do, the best definition of architecture that I can think of, architecture is the stories we tell ourselves about how we'd like to live. And it's genuinely as broad as that. So shall we go on to the next slide and talk a bit about something else? So what I'm going to do is give you talk about three different examples about what architecture is with this in mind. So this is, and I would recommend everyone goes off and Googles these people, because these are quite good examples to think about. So this is Adolf Loos, who was, I don't know, he was working maybe 100 years ago, and in Vienna, and he made these spaces which sort of flowed into each other, and they were specifically designed for the ways people wanted to live. And that what you're looking at is the Müller house, which I think he ended up living in himself, and that little section there is of the Müller house, how the spaces all connect to each other. It's a really weird space. The art I've shown, the photograph I've shown of it does it no justice. The other one is the American bar. And if you look at that and then you think, what do comics look like? And then you look at the sort of the flow of it and the neighboring spaces and how you might all go around it and so on. This is architecture that's starting to look like comics. And that sounds terribly literal. And the fact is, it is and it isn't. Yes, architecture does look like comics, and because it's like comics, but also there's more to it than that, like structure and flow and detail and beginnings, middles and ends and so on. And we should go on to the next slide, because otherwise I'll be here forever. Okay, Herman Hertzberger, another good one to look up. This is a Dutch guy and this is an office, this, if you believe it, is an office building in Central Bihar in the Netherlands. And he decided to design a new way of working where everyone is connected to everyone else, and it's a really nice space. This was done in the 1960s, and again you can see how the spaces relate to each other, and there's public spaces and private spaces and bits you know and bits you don't, and seeing and being seen and privacy and all of this. And this again transfers to comics. So when I talk about architecture, you think, well, no, it's more than brick walls. It's about space and connecting and flowing and telling stories, and to some extent about dreaming about what you'd like. And we should go on to the next one, which is, this is Brian Wildsmith. This isn't actually architecture at all, literally, but I think I'm a big fan of Brian's work, and what he's showing in this work is architectural qualities, which again show up in comics. So you have exposure and covering up and revealing and explaining and all sorts of things going on here. And architecture is the same. It is very, very often allegorical as well. So people are telling stories with their architecture which aren't literal. Your house tells the story of your life, and so on. We should go on to the next image. So what did I do? Well, this is one of the things. This is Oxford Brookes' new campus. This won loads of awards. I was not, for reasons, I was not around to see that happen, but basically this was an extension to an old building. This is their environment school. And we had to change all the ways of working of the academics. It was a lot. So we took the old building and we took the outside off, and we built a new building next to it, and then we connected it back to the old building, and this is what it looks like. And it's all new ways of working, and the university did a lot of work with the students and the academics and everyone to decide how they wanted it to be. The process of deciding what they wanted took as long, if not longer, than actually building it. And that's what that looks like. It was an experience, is all I can say. And we should go on to the next slide. Oh yeah, now this was a while ago. I was site architect down at the Dome, or not at the Dome exactly, at the Greenwich Peninsula refurbishment. So British Gas had the Greenwich Peninsula, they polluted it enormously, and although people know about the Dome, the sum of money that was used in that area was actually to refurbish this 2-mile long, heavily polluted peninsula with parks and whatever. And the thing was, architects, the people I was working with, Richard Rogers at the time, they were interested in, boring things like parks or grass or people being outside. They wanted to do swanky buildings, which meant that in the end it was just me, and that was tricky, because I rang up my dad and I said, I've got a 2-mile long peninsula, what should we do? And he was like, put a crop on it. And that's kind of where I was. So what I had to do in this instance, because it was just me and we were spending an awful lot of money, was I had to find new ways of describing it to the contractors. And again, so architecture, what people actually do, I say it's telling stories about the lives we want to live. It's literally doing that. We sit and we draw all day about, and we try and communicate what it is we're trying to do. And I drew all of, I just had to get it together in not very long. And I drew the whole peninsula in like markers and Tipp-Ex and red pens. And so that's what people who do architecture have to do, is they have to think how to communicate it. And that has helped to some extent. I don't draw any differently than I did when I was doing this. And we should go on to the next slide. Oh yeah, and so where this is all kind of out of order, I've done a load of other things, but where I ended with this, I think my last project was the Hallfield estate in West London and the Brownfield estate in East London, and which you will know it's the Balfour Tower. And for these are social projects, and I found myself going into people's flats and meeting lots and lots and lots and lots of people who I would never have met, and learning about their lives and listening to what they had to tell me, because my job was to go and meet people and for them to tell me the problems with their flats, which they did. And that kind of changed things, really. And it to some extent, it put me at odds with the architecture people who wanted, fancy window frames. And I was like, it's heating or eating. So we had different ends. And then we should go on to the next slide. And so what happened, I discovered comics and I didn't really know what they were. And I started a website called Space in Text, which if you Google Space in Text, all one word, you will find it. And this is a 2-year project about me trying to figure out, what is this comic thing? And I just spent, it's an old-fashioned art blog, and there's a lot of it. And I was just learning about comic artists and comics. And what we're looking at here is Alex Toth, who I'd never heard of. And so I've somebody said something about this guy, and I spent a lot of time on the internet going and looking stuff up. And Space in Text changed everything because it had lots and lots of readers. So when I did come to make comics, people actually did know who I was. It was kind of weird. And that, but it also really helped just looking at learning. So this was my school, really. And we should go on to the next slide. Go to the next one. Yeah, so what happened next was I got made redundant, as happens to many women in their early 40s. And frankly, I was devastated. I just finished that Oxford Brookes project, and they made me redundant like the next day, which was really hardcore. And I was sort of seeking work. And then when I wasn't seeking work, I was learning to draw, because you have to have something to do. And after a bit, somebody suggested I make a comic, and I was like, okay. And I made a comic, and it was part of Solipsistic Pop, which some of you will know, about losing my job. And this is a couple of pages of it. And it doesn't really look like a normal comic, because I was like, well, how do I say this thing I want to say? And it was also Solipsistic Pop, which was about maps. And this is a map. And it's a map of me trying to figure out who I was, because I'd just been identified by what I did, not who I was, and I didn't really know. And so I did that. And then we should go on to the next slide. And what happened? Yeah, a page of it found itself onto the internet, and then somebody rang up and asked me to draw their graphic novel, and then I said yes, and I did it. And I think, and I haven't got a picture of that because it turned out the guy was an absolutely terrible man, but it had all sorts of outcomes. I mean, it was a massive baptism of fire. I learned how to market my comic. I had to learn how to use Photoshop. I think it was the first time I'd drawn with a pencil since I was, in my 20s, because we'd been using computers for so long. And it opened up all sorts of possibilities. And the art on the right is by Jock, whose art I saw, and although I didn't think I can do that, I looked at it and I thought, well, that looks fun. Maybe I could do something. It looks like he's having a good time. And then graphic novel when I got the best emerging talent at the British Comic Awards. This is only 10 years ago. And I was like, wow, this is kind of weird. And then we should go on to the next slide. And while I was doing this, because you can't stop being an architect ever, it would seem, I made a project called Think of a City, which still exists, and you can Google that as well. And this is a giant, decade-long, exquisite corpse project to build a city in real time. And this is some of the art. We did it for a couple of years and then sort of parked it because my editors were starting to give me funny looks about maybe I shouldn't be doing that when I should be doing their thing. But we aim to bring it back this year, and we will be talking to people about bringing new people into it, because it's a 10-year-old list, but it's an exquisite, it's made by hundreds of people, and I would go, if you go onto the website, you can see that. I'm not going to talk any more about it because I could talk about it a lot. And we should go on to the next slide. And anyway, so I made this graphic novel, and as it turned out, it was a bestseller, which was a bit of a surprise to me, because I was like, nobody knows who I am. But I think it was because, I'm not going to say, I think people were sorry for me and they helped me, but they did, and I'll take it. And so it did well, and I thought, well, this is okay, actually. I'll do another one. And so this is a creator and book I made with Image Comics and Steve Niles, who is an American veteran horror writer who we did this, and it's architectural in that it's delving into some real Americana. And when we made it, it was very, very unusual in that it was very much about the real world, as opposed to, say, science fiction, which there was a lot of. And that was an experience, but that is at one of our creator in books, so I actually own that book, and it's out there in the world. And we should go on to the next slide. And so, still doing architecture. People helped, lots and lots and lots and lots of people helped me. Everybody helped me. It was amazing. And and this is one of those things where Kieran Gillen, who is doing, this is from The Wicked and the Divine. Yes, it is from The Wicked and the Divine, very early on. And he asked me to make a map for the book, which was also a story. So this is telling a story in the middle of some sequential pages about somebody going to some people going to an event and what they did, and we're doing it with the map, and then like the scribbling that they do on the map when they're there to remind them to do things, and it's full of puns, and there's all sorts of stuff, and there's things hidden in, there's like almost like secrets hidden in the architecture. And so it's using these other techniques of communication and remembering that it doesn't have to be just panel, panel, panel. There's many ways to say the thing. And in this instance, where the whole event is in a space, you can talk a lot about, you can tell a story by how people interact with the space. And that's what we were doing there. She gone to the next one. And then I did some more things. I drew Hit Girl in India, which took a long time and is about Mumbai, it actually is. And I collaborated with the Korean artist LDC to make, well, the Hayward Gallery asked for a graphic novel to, what's the word? Fit in with the exhibition that LDC was doing at the Hayward. And they had a budget which was not a graphic novel money. And I was like, no, but you can't have that, but you can have this. And so the illustration at the bottom is one of several I made for them. And because I was making art to illustrate another artist's work, which was weird in its own right, everything I used was a found material, be it a photo or a texture or a photograph or maps, or LDC contributed photographs. We got, what is it? We licensed some art from Archigram that she was inspired by, and Archigram let us use that and draw over it. And so that was one of the things I've done. Really, where we are is I'm talking about things that the architecture thing led into. I've never really left it, and I'm still an architect. My dues are kept up. And we should go on to the next page. And then I did Sleeping Beauties. This is a Stephen King collaboration, which was sort of more or less my lockdown project. And I more or less got left on my own to do this because it was lockdown and the editors were all made redundant, the letterers made redundant, nobody was talking to me, and I just sat in the house and drew a whole, it's a 240-page graphic novel, and it finally had its final incarnation this last October, and we finally put it to bed, which was really something. So there's that you'll see that in Waterstones. The people who are in this is somebody giving birth here. I seem to get all these projects. All the people are real people, and I work with people locally to where I live. And I've just drawn Lucy Sullivan, who is here, being eaten by a shark, and there's another dimension to this work, which is personal, which is going and working with people's kids and working with families and just doing something fun and engaging. And so I go out into my local area and I'm talking to people about making comics, and then sometimes that happens. And we should go on to the next one. And then what did I do? And then I did Department of Truth, which is a creator and project I don't own, where Martin Simmons and James Tynan asked me to go and draw some issues, and I've drawn about 1/9 of the whole book. And what you're looking at here is 2 pages and a double-page spread from some of the more recent work from that. And the double-page spread on the right, which was my cover sheet, that's Marilyn Monroe's house, which I completely made up. Because James had things he wanted to happen in it, and he asked, that was not in the script either, he asked for me to show Marilyn Monroe's house, and then the guy who is the protagonist in the book working his way through the house and finding these things, and then finally meeting Marilyn and having a conversation in her bedroom. And I was like, well, how do you do that? How do you show what people see, but also what they don't see? Because it's a choice. It's a journey through a house is a very, very select thing. And how do you organise that to say that that actually happened? He saw the dress gallery, but he didn't see the library. This is what he knows about Marilyn, but he doesn't know that. And you can say a lot about people in this way, that Marilyn had all these things, and maybe people didn't know, but we're also talking about her state of mind here. And the colours for all of this bit that you're looking at were by Geordie Belair, and I normally give colour notes when I'm working with a colourist, but with Geordie it's like, no notes, go ahead Geordie, do your thing. And this is how it turns out. She's very, very good. And we should go on to the next page. And this is also from the Department of Truth. And so again, we're sort of making spaces and making different pages. I don't think this had an unconventional script. I think it was just some panels or something. And I just thought, oh, I'd like to draw the car like that. And maybe we can make more of this. And so this is the way, and my comics work has got more and more and more like this, where it's, well, how can we do this? And so this is Marilyn driving up the road and having a conversation in the car outside Los Angeles. And we should go on to the next page. And yeah, did some stuff for Marvel. I drew a comic about abortion for Marvel, and they published it in February. And this is some of the line art. And it is an allegory, which it was deliberately, because obviously I'm not going to just draw a comic about abortion for Marvel, because they would never print it. But they did know that it was about abortion. It was just, this was a good way to talk about it, which I found quite interesting, that allegory is something we're going to, I think, with the kind of political situation we've got in the US, we're going to be doing a lot more of. It's something that was, Kafka is a really good example. It's something that people in oppressed societies have used to tell their stories without telling their stories too literally and getting into trouble. And so this is what that is about. I'll come back to that question, Squibbers, it's a good question. And this is line art. So this is uncoloured. Again, this was coloured by somebody else. Generally with colour, I don't tend to colour my sequentials because it takes too long. And I like collaboration. I like exploring what other people are doing. But when I'm doing book covers, which I've done quite a lot of, if you go on my website, which I'll get to in a minute, you'll see all of that's my colouring. And it tends to sort of be cyclical, where I colour book covers and then colourists look at it and go, oh, she likes that, and this is how she colours her work, which I will do the same, because a good colourist will look how an artist colours their own work and use that to inform what they do. So although I'm not good at sequential colours, because Geordie Belair, frankly, is a million times better, there's a kind of cycle going on where I colour things and then people use them, and I colour things and people use them. So for example, the Marilyn in the car page, which you just saw, if you go on my website, there is a book cover which is Frankie, who is Lucy Sullivan's daughter, holding some flowers, and I drew that, and then Geordie went on my website and just basically took how that was done and put it in the book, which is great. It's the same colour scheme, and I don't have a problem with that at all. What works. And yeah, my relationship to colour. One thing I would say, in talking about architecture, is that architects are rubbish at using colour, in my opinion, and I think that they could learn a great deal from comics. So much about colour. There is a project I want to do, which I am talking to somebody about at the moment, which is, there is no book, if you believe it, about what architecture actually is. And I would hope, like, ask me in 2 years' time if this actually happens. I want to make the version of understanding comics for architecture. It doesn't exist, but it would be really helpful to everybody. So yeah, I mean, we should go on to another slide, but I think I'm just about finished and I can get to the questions. And yeah, this is a double page spread from that abortion thing, and it reads across the top, down the side, from side to side, and top to bottom. A lot of people really hated this. I'm very Marmite for comic readers. They either really like it or they really, really, really hate me. And this is one of the things people really hate because it's not normal and it's not conventional, but it is a comic page which you inhabit like architecture, where something's happening and something else is happening at the same time, and something else is happening at the same time, and you interact with them all. And yes, that's confusing, but also that's life. So that's what that is. And we should go on to the next page because I think I'm just about done. Yeah, my website, you can look at what I do. If we don't get to the questions, and I'm going to get to the questions in a sec, if we don't get a question answered, just email me. I'm very chatty. I will try and answer questions, or you can find me on Blue Sky and ask me there, or you can find me in person. And I'm at the Lakes this year, which is quite exciting. And yeah, so just ask if it doesn't get answered here or you think of it later, just ask me and we'll chat about it. Because I like to talk about this kind of thing because people always bring new things to the table and it's always changing. So no, and that's it.